Welcome to High Point, Simon.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
As any guest, I've got loads of questions to ask you. I'll ask you to introduce yourself, but I've got a lot of questions around the Alliance for Sustainable Building products. What's the mission, how old it is, how big it is, how it's organized, what the topics as well that the organization is focusing on at the moment. How do you think the UK is doing sustainability-wise compared to other countries? I've got a very specific question on domestic private rented properties. There's a new target for energy efficiency. I'd like to have your view. I've got a few questions. I did a bit of research on what that means exactly. And also natural fiber insulation. I'm really interested also from an acoustic perspective.
Okay.
And about EPDs, they are very important, and maybe some upcoming events or other comments.
Perfect.
But can I ask you to introduce yourself the way you would like to be introduced?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So I'm CEO at the Alliance for Sustainable Building Products. So we're a not-for-profit mission-led organization, and our mission is to transform the built environment into a low-carbon and healthy endeavor. So we're a membership organization. We've got 161 members, I think, at the last count. And we've had 50 new members this year, which to me is particularly encouraging given the fact that the market has been quite tough out there. So we've lost a few, which is a shame because our retention rate was really, really high. But all in all, I think we've grown by about something like 18%. And we have 27 patron members who are meeting tomorrow. We're bringing all of our patron members together to network and then input into our strategy, give them a little bit of a rundown what we've been up to this year, and help us sort of formulate our strategy for 2030. So,
can you communicate on who they are, who those guys are?
Yeah, so there's a real range, and so they range from the very large, like Wienerberger, for example, and then through to organisations like Timber Development UK, so sort of membership organisations, and then members like Urban, who probably have made the most mass timber buildings here in the UK, so 300 plus and counting. And then we have members like Blackstone Strip Out. So we have a reuse campaign, and we've brought in quite a range of folk who are focused on the definition and the sort of end-of-life stage of things. So it's not just manufacturers, it's also contractors, demolition contractors, strip-out contractors. And then we have a range of natural fiber insulations, and then also a range of consultants. So it's quite a mixed church. And so I think the thing that binds everybody together is the Alliance for Sustainable Building Products, which is really, really good. And so I'm really looking forward to that event tomorrow.
What's the benefit of being a member?
So the benefit of being a member, so we do lots of knowledge sharing events. So maybe we've been doing too many, I think. But probably at least one a month, sometimes 3 a month. So webinars, we aim to share knowledge as cost effectively as possible. So quite a lot of those are free for members, and then we'll charge a fairly nominal sum for non-members. And then we try to engage our members in a range of things like, so giving them speaking opportunities and then getting involved in research projects. So we have about 5 research projects on the go at the moment. So we try and build our patron members into our research projects. So there's a range of different opportunities. We don't have a paywall for our outputs. We are a knowledge sharing organization. So we want to share our knowledge as wide and as far as we possibly can. So we don't have a sort of members area. We want to push out all of our outputs, and we want to make those freely available to as many people as possible. So that's our sort of general ethos. Yeah, and I think we've grown in staff. We've taken on new people, and we're growing membership-wise. And I know other membership organisations are struggling just at the moment and losing members. So I feel like it's very encouraging. I think, go back to your question, we launched in 2011, so a good long time ago. And at that stage, feels like we put our flag in the sand, and we were quite sort of over here. We were quite left field and a little bit niche. And we haven't moved, but everyone's come towards us, which is rather nice. So we feel now that our time is now. So, for example, we're a member of the United Nations Environmental Programme, ABC, so the Buildings Coalition, and they're all about bio-based products and how we can increase the amount of bio-based products in our buildings. So it feels to us that, okay, so our agenda has become other people's agenda, which, is flattery, and I'll take it. So we believe in collaboration. We believe in sharing knowledge. We don't think that holding back knowledge, for your own use is the way forward. We think that collaboration is the way forward. And one fine example of that is our natural fiber insulation group. So it's a community of interest, I think is one phrase for it. And we brought together basically all of the manufacturers and suppliers of natural fiber insulation in the UK, who are naturally competitors, to work together, to collaborate. And that was 5 years ago. That was, yeah, I know. And so 5 years ago, so the first meeting, everyone was a little bit, I don't know what to say, quite sort of po-faced and not giving too much away. Excuse me. And now, 5 years later, it's everyone's, I think, seen the benefit of collaboration, and we're trying to, find common terminology for fairly complicated things like decrement delay and breathability and hydroscopicity, and try and get everyone to, speak in the same sort of language and break down what are quite complex things. And sometimes, I don't know whether you agree with me here, Mark, but sometimes I think that specialists want to make the subject more complicated, not less complicated, but more complicated, so that they, as a specialist, you have to rely on the specialist to sort of help you navigate through what seems like a really complex situation. So it's quite challenging to break down complex things into simpler things, but that's sort of partly what we're trying to do. So we've got lots of outputs with our natural fiber insulation group, and this year we had our first natural fiber insulation week, and so we worked with all our members, opened up their showrooms, invited people in to come and visit, see how they make stuff, see where their showrooms, see how that you might install their product. Yeah, so that was really exciting. I think that went really, really well. So, we look forward to doing more of that.
There's loads of comments and things to bounce back on, but I'll start with apologizing because Atelier Crescendo used to be a member, but we've not renewed our membership, and we will definitely be members again. And it's also because we're launching a branch of Atelier Crescendo.
Are you launching a what? I beg your pardon?
A branch of Atelier Crescendo, but you kind of know about it because the first time we spoke, I presented it to you like a small a catalog to explain how products work and list them, what's available in the market, with an intention to have more bio-based natural products. So it will definitely be part of it. And also you speak about education and knowledge sharing. That's also the other the goal of that other company, which is incorporated now. So Acoustic Design Library, but we're going to make a big launch next year.
Oh, that's exciting. Okay, look forward to hearing more about that.
Yeah, and it's going to be education-led because we've been teaching at different universities, and so we thought let's make it online.
Okay.
Now it might be paid, or like you may need to pay for the course, or it may
Yeah.
be free depending on the level of expertise. But that, you said earlier about experts and specialists. Yes, acoustic design is very difficult to understand,
Yeah.
or it feels like it's difficult to understand. But I think it's just because it's a topic that's never been taught. But as soon as
Okay.
if you teach it the right way,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody can understand, and it's our goal to have for everybody, all our collaborators, even if they're not experts, to at least understand what we say and not blindly trust us.
Yeah, I think we need more acoustic technicians. I'm fed up of going into places where the sound is reverberating around off really hard surfaces, and it's so painful on the ears.
Yeah,
I don't know. It needs to be more of a day-to-day. We need to call our acoustician, or at least have we thought about it? Because I'm not sure that people think about it.
no. Well, you can hear it when it's finished, but you can't plan or you can
Yeah, but you would have
see
thought
the
some
problem.
basic understanding of noise and how it travels and so on and
Yeah,
so forth, would yeah. But as you
yeah,
say, maybe it's not taught very well. I mean, obviously, I'm a charter surveyor. I certainly never covered off acoustics. But then, there's loads of stuff I didn't cover. I didn't really cover sustainability. So, but this was a while ago.
yeah.
So that explains it, I think.
We even our slogan or motto for the acoustic design library is "Acoustic is a dark art, but it can be simply explained."
Right. Okay.
Hopefully, we'll
Yeah.
we'll
Well, I look
stand
forward.
by this and try
Uh-huh.
to make it as easy as possible to understand. But we'll
Yeah.
see.
I look forward to dipping my toes into that.
Yeah.
Or my ears, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's probably
Okay.
mostly
Or both.
eyes, but
Mostly eyes. Yes. Fine.
yeah. So you mentioned a few topics and subjects
Hmm.
that the organization is focusing on. Have you?
Hmm.
The natural materials is a big thing. Natural insulation
Yeah.
materials.
So we know that in France, I know you're French, so
Yeah.
we know the French market is something like 8 to 10% of all insulation sold in France is a natural fiber insulation, whereas in this country it's less than 1%. So, I mean, I live in Deal, which is next to Dover, and on a good day, which isn't today, but on a good day, I can see France. I'm closer to France than I am to London. So yeah, I don't know. It seems that the French, would suggest are really doing so many things right. I keep looking to France for, ideas and inspiration. It must be said. So yeah,
Why do you think? Well, my opinion is that every country's got a certain level of advancement. I
yeah,
feel like so we are vegetarian and vegan as much as we can
hmm
in our family, and when we go back to France, it's nearly impossible to find any vegan options, let
yeah,
alone vegetarian. Sometimes, if you go to a restaurant, there will not be any vegetarian options. Here in the UK, it's not even thinkable. You will always have
yeah,
one vegetarian and a vegan option. So,
yeah.
why do you think the UK is not using as much natural fibers? Is that because of some lobbies or like the lack of knowledge or education of some
I think it's
professionals?
I think it's all of those things. Um, and there's no real driver. So um, quite a lot of countries in Europe will offer you some sort of subsidy if you use bio-based products. There's nothing. That's not the way that the UK does things. That will never happen, I don't think. And then there's sort of looking at things like, the carbon that's sequestered in these products. So, obviously there's a lot more carbon stored in timber, but there's also carbon stored in insulation products. And in France, they have a life cycle analysis system, which is called dynamic life cycle analysis, and that goes some way to rewarding the carbon that's locked up and taken out of the atmosphere, locked up in our buildings. So it's a much better system. So and then over here, there's also concerns and issues around fire and damp and moisture. So I mean, there are quite a lot of barriers that need to be overcome. I mean, they've all been overcome, and some building regulations and inspectors are much more familiar with these types of products, and there's no issues. But yeah, there's lots of barriers along the way. But I mean, all of the guys in the natural fiber insulation group are all experiencing, good growth. And when we first started, it was more about how do we sell more stuff. And now it's much more about how do we keep up with the demand, and, how do we expand and how do we grow. Growing a company can be difficult too. And how do we find that sort of level of expertise and that level of skill that we need? So, it's also back down to that, skills gap, which I think is across most areas, really, certainly in sustainability.
So what are the barriers? I had a question on what are the cons of natural insulation materials? Because the problem with acoustics as well is, like, whenever we suggest something as an alternative to a replacement of mineral wool, it gets rejected either because it's too expensive, because it's not enough moisture resistant, or because people are not keen to have it. There's loads of alternatives, but what do you think the barriers? Which barriers have been taken down, and we don't know?
Yeah, so natural insulation does not deal well with being and getting wet and staying wet. So it's no real good for insulating cavities, for example. So, there's a lot of cavity construction in the UK, and so it's not ideal for cavity filling. So I suppose that immediately rules out a certain percentage. It's fine for internal walls. It's fine for loft insulation, and it can be fine for external wall insulation as well, on a solid wall. So covered with with a render, and there's no doubt about it that wood fiber, for example, wood fiber insulation makes for a much better fit with our more traditional buildings than any other type of insulation product, because it can take up moisture and then release moisture. So trials by SPAB over something like 6 years by a woman called Caroline Rye at Archimetrics showed that basically, wood fiber insulation deals really, really well with moisture. There's no sort of issues about moisture being trapped between the insulation line and the external wall. So at the moment, quite a lot of it is down to warranties. So if you're going to be involved in any sort of social housing, external wall insulation, you need to have a guarantee for 25 years. And that guarantee tends to rule out many of the smaller players. So there's only one or two that can actually enter into that market. So that's another barrier that we're trying to break down. We're trying to negotiate to see how we can get around this. It's quite a long time consuming business, but slow progress. Yeah.
Have you got any documentations on your website? I'm just having a look. I know you've got a page on natural fiber insulation.
Yeah, there's not so much about the warranty aspect of things.
Mm-hmm.
We are working in a research project called Transforming Homes, which is with Bath University and Cardiff University, and then Exeter University. And the idea of that project is to retrofit a number of homes in Cardiff and in Bristol with bio-based products, and they've just about hit this wall with the sort of warranty provision, and I'm not quite sure, how we're going to get around that. So it's interesting that this is a real barrier, and there's no doubt about it. And I suppose another barrier is that we don't make wood fibre insulation here in the UK. Why don't we? Well,
Yeah,
good question. I mean, it's down to the fact that it's a big investment, so at the minute, we tend to bring in wood fibre insulation mainly from Austria, from Germany, from France. So we don't make it here either at the moment. So obviously that affects its price, increases the transport impact, and so on.
yeah, that's true. You could recycle any timber products and get them from the tip.
Well, we've been working with Gary Newman at Wood Knowledge Wales, and he has a very nice prospectus that sort of trying to encourage companies to look at investing in Wales and in wood fibre, and I know that's been received with some interest. So I can't really say too much more, but there are a number of players that are looking at this quite seriously, which is really encouraging, because it's been like this for 20 years. So, I first started working in sustainability at a place called Construction Resources, which was London's first green builders merchant. It was set up by a very wealthy guy who brought Autodesk into Europe, basically, and he was a publisher as well. And then he got all this money, bought this very nice house, and looked to try and find a way to renovate it, and found that there weren't the types of natural products that he was looking for available really here in the UK. So he set up Construction Resources, and brought in a team, and then started importing the likes of wood fibre insulation and sheep's wool insulation, and then a whole range of different systems, including mass timber. So you would go into the showroom, and there was a working solar PV panel, and a solar thermal panel, and rainwater harvesting integrated into the building. All these cut-through models showing how you do detailing, passive house detailing. So it was so really ahead of its time. And what a fantastic place to learn about this sort of stuff. So at that stage, I walked in and said, I'd really like a job. And they'd said, well, what do you know about sustainability? And it's like, well, I don't know anything. And they said, okay, we'll give you a job in the warehouse. So my job was to move all these pallets of wood fibre and unload these double sort of sized trucks of sheep's wool insulation and cellulose insulation, and then sort of move them out to customers as they needed them. But they sold a whole range of natural paints and natural carpets and solid wood flooring. It basically sold every product that you needed to build or to retrofit your house. It was a fantastic place. Sadly, the chap who set it up has just passed away, and so his obituary was in the Times last week, and he was a fascinating, absolute genius of a guy. I think he spoke 8 languages fluently, he'll be missed.
What's his name again?
So his name is Richard Handyside.
Okay.
He was a publisher, and he bought the Little Red School Book into the UK, which was based on a sort of Maoist concept and first published in Denmark, and it was sort of aimed at 14-year-old children, and it talked about sex and drugs, and in a language that a 14-year-old can understand. And Mary Whitehouse, who was at the time dealing with areas like that, insisted. She even gave a copy to the Pope, and he was taken to court, and he was charged with being a pornographer, and fined £100. He then appealed and took that to the European Court of Human Rights, and that went on. He didn't win that particular case, but the settlement is used now as a precedent for you're allowed to say, you have a right as an individual to say what you want, as long as you're not, talking about other people. So it's freedom of expression, really. So he was a sort of pathfinder in so many different ways. And that's where I learnt my trade. And, so I had the pleasure of working with solar engineers and guys who could size your rainwater harvesting systems, and guys who were expert in, say, Tadalact plaster, which is like a Moroccan plaster, which is waterproof for your bathroom. And we'd have craftspeople in, and we'd do sort of demos. It was a really, really amazing place to learn. And yeah, I was lucky. I could soak up, loads of knowledge, which has served me really well over the years.
Interesting. Talking about wood fiber, I'd really like to see more wood fiber for underfloor heating systems.
Yeah.
Wood fiber is a little bit resilient as well, so it's got some acoustic benefits in terms of impact control. But I haven't seen any test. If somebody listen to the podcast and knows or has a product that has been tested for impacts on insulation, just contact me.
So there was one of our members, they dropped out of membership, a company called Jupiter, and they had an underfloor heating with straw panels. And it was, I don't know. It seemed like a really interesting product. I can't tell you much more about it than that, but there is that product.
Okay. It's obviously would be so great to have an alternative to polystyrene or polyurethane for underfloor heating systems.
Polystyrene is such a horrible, horrible product, really. We also have a sort of reducing plastics in construction group. So we've got a sort of virtual house where you can, look and see where you can change a product around. Oh, excuse me. And try and reduce the amount of plastic, in our buildings. So, yeah, I was quite interested to see that paint was one of the largest, or so it's claimed at least, largest contributor towards microplastic pollution. So most people don't really realize that the average pot of paint contains a lot of plastic, ultimately. So you're washing plastic down the sink as you wash your brushes, and most people do. And then as the paint wears, it enters the watercourses and into our rivers and into our seas. So, so we have another group that looks at more natural paints, and so linseed oil paints and Cassian and these types of products, to try and show that there are product alternatives on the market, clay-based paints, for example, and really it's a case of knowing about these products. Most people don't really think about it. When you go into a DIY place and you order paint, the thing that's most predominant in your mind is the color. And if you can color match something, then that's sort of job done. And
whether it is water-based or oil-based.
Yeah, people think if it's water-based, then it's fine, but actually it's quite complex chemistry to enable paint and water to sit together and mix together. So there's a range of sort of stabilizers, and there's binders in these types of products. Yeah.
Sorry, Simon. can you name me a few brands? Or where can we
Yeah,
get those
yeah. I
paints? Or
mean,
can we
if you
get them in any normal shops?
no, they're not. I don't think they're available in sort of normal shops. So, I mean, if you look at our website, we have a paints and finishes group, and you can see who are members of that group. So there's a company called Earthborn, for example. There's a company called Bruns. So they do like a linseed oil. And then there's Edward Bulmer paints. They also do like a linseed oil paint for finishes. And then there's a company called Kime that sell mineral paints. And so that's really for both inside and outside. And some of those products have got Nature Plus accreditation, and Nature Plus is an eco label that's awarded really only to the very best products, the cleanest products. And so there are a number of products, the Kime products in particular, that have got Nature Plus certification, which is important if you're using a product on the inside in your house, because obviously, if you're putting stuff on the wall, you're breathing in a whole range of VOCs and other nasties, which at the end of the day, you don't want to be doing that really with little people around. And for painters and decorators, who are breathing it in all day, every day, there's a strong link between cancers and being a decorator. So, there are these alternatives available, and we should be all using them. So, yeah, it's really spreading the word that these things are available, and they're not like, they're a little bit more expensive maybe, but then they're sort of like a DIY type balm standard emulsion might be, or a wood paint, but they're not hugely more expensive, and certainly with the Kime paints, they sit on. So you quite often you'll go to a place and you see all this paint that's been blistered, lifted, and what's happened, that's plastic, and there's water that's got between the substrate and the paint, and it's got nowhere to go, so it just blisters. Whereas like a mineral paint, it'll breathe, and so you don't get that problem with the blistering, and which is so typical. We see it all the time, don't you? The sort of raised surfaces and holes and cracks. So you won't get that with a mineral product. So, there are so many advantages to it. Yeah.
I'm discovering something. I feel, well, generally on the podcast, for every episode, I feel very naive because and that's the aim of the podcast. It is to discover and learn from the guest. But on the paint, I didn't realize, and I feel very bad because we've done loads of innovation in our house, and we've got little people as well. So, it's like
I do guest lecturing at University College London, so they have a master's on healthy buildings, and so healthy buildings is a real topic. I'm really keen on generally, and so we have our Healthy Buildings conference every year. So that's in February next year, and the focus is really on looking at the indoor internal environment and trying to understand, how we can improve it, and then looking at the links between external pollution and internal pollution, and then the links between those and ventilation. So it's all good stuff. Healthy buildings, and then the sort of broader, slightly softer concept of things like biophilia. So that sort of feeling you get when you go into a building. So you've got exposed timber walls, or like it's a straw bale house. It just feels good, It feels like you're somewhere natural. Feels like you're, you can. There are some brilliant case studies. There's one. My favourite case study is the Dyson Neonatal Centre, which is in Bath, and they did a mass timber sort of rebuild of the neonatal centre, and they put all these heart monitors on the babies, and so in this new place, the heart monitors were showing that babies were calmer, so their heart rates were beating much less, and then visitors were staying longer because they really enjoyed the environment, and they found it peaceful, calming, and relaxing. And so, yeah, I mean, what a really lovely piece of research, just to show that, you know, this approach has immediate health effects and benefits. So, and
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to a really exciting project that colleagues of ours have been doing at DRMM Architects. So they're members with us, and they've done a project that's been funded by Built by Nature, which is looking at 5 mass timber buildings and comparing the sort of carbon story and then the health and well-being story, and going in to talk to occupants and just to see, you know, what do you think about your building? How do you feel about it? Stuff like that, you know, which I'm really interested in. And, you know, not surprisingly, everybody in the mass timber buildings really loves them. You know, just sort of say, oh yeah, we come to work, we love it, we feel calm, we feel relaxed. You know, you feel just more productive as well. You know, and at the end of the day, you know, bosses want productive staff. You know, so productive staff means more output, more turnover. So, you know, making that link between health and well-being and output, I think is huge. It needs to be, it's well stated, but it needs to be made again and again and again and reinforced, I think.
I can't agree more. Yeah, one on the topic of polystyrene and insulation, I had a quick question on what do you think about filling cavity walls?
Yeah, I mean, I just hate it because if you go to a building site, I mean, they're cutting polystyrene with a saw, and you just see this dust floating off. And so, you know, there's been quite a lot of studies looking at London air at various heights. So they've taken monitors, you know, at ground level and then higher up. And I mean, there's just a lot of plastic in the air. And then, of course, you know, it'll rain and it'll fall out of the air and so on into the waterways, and off they go. So
My question was more on filling the
the cavity.
cavities of external walls of houses.
Yeah.
We get that so much, and so many people are knocking on our doors selling this.
Absolutely.
And
So do you
I've been
mean
told,
as a bead that's blown in, you mean?
yes,
Yeah. So there's a real danger of carrying moisture from the sort of outside to the inside. The idea of a cavity is that you're separating the two sides of the wall, you
to
know,
make
so
everything
that
breathe.
you're not going to get that moisture. And so there is a real danger of I wouldn't do it on my house, put it like that. And you know, I don't know. I would much rather go for either external wall insulation or internal wall insulation. There are issues with both, and you've got to be careful about both, because you've got to think about condensation and the dew point. And you know, we've done some quite interesting work seeing how much insulation you need on the inside face. And actually, you know, the big work is done by the first 50 and 60 millimeters of insulation. So, you know, the big bang for your buck, and, you know, from a cost perspective, if you can put in 50 or 60 mil of insulation on the inside face, so that's 2 inches, you know, then you're gonna do well when it comes to, you know, reducing your energy consumption. So yeah, okay, everyone's like, you know, precious. They've only got a certain amount of space and so on and so forth. And we're just doing some guidance actually for Letchworth Garden City, trying to see how we can help them or help residents sort of improve the energy performance of their homes. You know, there is this tension between the planning regime and then what's best for your house by way of performance. And yeah, so that's an interesting one. So fortunately, more and more of my colleagues are moving to planning, and maybe they see it as a huge challenge. There's a a colleague of mine called Kat Scott, who's just started at Hackney Council. Hackney Council were the first council to talk about a wood first policy back in 2012. And there was quite a lot of rumblings from the concrete industry, funnily enough. But as a result of that policy, Hackney, I think, as this is still the case, boasts more mass timber buildings than any other borough or any other place in the UK because of that planning lever. And after a lot of lobbying by the concrete industry, it was declared to be ultra virus. In other words, it couldn't be adopted as an approach.
If you got any contacts at Hackney Council, I'd be really interested to have them on the podcast.
Yeah, my colleague has been. It's her third day today.
Okay, maybe you can introduce me.
Yeah. Her name is Kat Scott. So she's just left DRMM. She's been working on this project on the sort of mass timber carbon quality of life, and she's a speaker at our Healthy Buildings event in February next year. But yeah, I mean, she's a sort of dynamic individual and a font of knowledge. So I think Hackney is such a gain for Hackney, that's for sure. How she'll find it, I don't know, because councils generally try and be materially agnostic, and so they're not going to put over one product up and above another. Maybe that's fair enough. But we are finding that now councils are demanding things like circular economy statements. And I did an interview with a guy called Ian Poole at Westminster. So he's at Westminster Council, and he was saying that they had a development that was turned down because it was that they had a poor circular economy statement. And to me, that was music to my ears, because I've been talking about the circular economy for a long time, and slightly frustrated that somehow there's a lot of talk and not much action, and no teeth to make it happen. So this is a precedent. I think it's the first time I've heard of a large development. You could argue that Westminster can afford to turn down large applications. So there is that, but they're leading the way, and that's really encouraging. So hopefully that will encourage, because at the minute, I mean, if you're developing in London, yeah, you fill in a circular economy statement, you tick a few boxes and say, yeah, we'll crush our concrete aggregate and it'll be recycled. No one's recycling concrete aggregate in London, by the way. So this, it just means that people are actually going to really have to think about, stripping out stuff from the building, reusing as much stuff as possible. So we've been looking at reusing constructional steel. So how do you take steel out of old buildings and put it into new buildings? And the answer is pretty easy. You just need to do that. I mean, it's a case of engaging with your demolition contractor and asking them to have that approach. And I'm quite interested. The demolition industry is changing. It's no longer the sort of like brown suitcases full of cash. Maybe it might have had a bit of a reputation like that, but now it's turning into something that's about deconstruction and not demolition.
Yeah, I've recently, I'm working on a project at the moment where the structural engineers are talking about repurposing some steel.
Yeah.
And it's just very nice.
Yeah, we've been working with a guy called Roy Fishwick at Cleveland Steel and Tubes. He's the original man of steel. And, there's now, this was a desktop study for us, and now 10 years later, there's now a market. And so several suppliers have entered the market. And so it's much, it's much more common. We've got lots of case studies on our website showing, where it's been done, from a single house to an architect who went, okay, well, I can do this in my house, through all the way through to very fancy office buildings in the centre of London. So yeah, there's so many precedents now that it's becoming normal, which is great. Yeah.
I worked on talking about proactive council. I worked on a few projects now in London where, and obviously timber projects, where the council asked to achieve a certain degree of uplift above the standard building regs for acoustics. And I thought, first of all, it's very nice, and second, I wonder if it's because the building is going to be timber, so they know there are some weaknesses in timber, especially at low frequencies. But obviously, that uplift didn't include those low frequencies.
Okay.
But I thought it's nice to see, if it's the case, if it's because it's a timber building, it's nice to see a first step from the council recognizing those weaknesses.
Sure. Yeah. No. Absolutely.
So talking about insulation, what do you think about the new energy efficiency rules for rented properties? Obviously, I'll just summarize this.
Yeah.
Now,
you might have to do that for my benefit as well as some listeners.
By 2030, so far, rented properties needed to achieve Class B in energy efficiency. Now, from 2030, by 2030, all rented properties will have to achieve Class C. And I did some just rented properties.
Okay.
I did some small research on what does it take to achieve Class C, and I think it says it's just standard double glazing. And please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. If somebody knows better than me, obviously there's loads. And like a standard boiler with some amount of insulation in the loft, but not too much. And there's no renewable energy sources. That's Class C. Class E, sorry. Class C is enhanced double glazing with a more efficient boiler and some amount of renewable energy sources and some good amount of insulation in the loft, but that can be improved. I think this is easily achievable, and by 2030, it's like in 6 years. Surely the landlord can. That's what I'm thinking initially. The landlord's going to achieve that. Obviously, we not. It's just my opinion, but I'm not a landlord, so it's probably easier to think like this. If I was a landlord, maybe I would kick off a bit more. But also from the tenant's perspective, you want a house that is quite well insulated, and obviously it costs money to heat up a house. And there's also, sorry, I'll finish. There's also some website I found that mentioned the Hamptons letting agency, and they said that tenants would save for a house that achieves EPC D to C, they would save £500 a year. And to go from E to C, they would achieve roughly save about £1,300 a year, which is quite a lot.
Significant, yeah.
So yeah, what's your opinion?
Well, I'm not a landlord either.
Okay.
So I reckon it's probably does depend on whether you are or you're not, or you're a tenant even, because at the end of the day, there is a possibility. I mean, rents have gone through the roof anyway, but I mean, obviously those costs could well be passed on to the tenant in terms of rent. So yeah, I mean, obviously, this has been talked about for years, and under the last government, it's just been delayed and delayed. So it's about time. As you say, it's not very challenging targets, but at least I think it will make a difference. We've always said, and I've been saying it for a long time, that it should be linked to your council tax. And so if you're a band A, then you should get a reduction on your council tax. And I tell you what, that would completely galvanise and completely change the market, because people go, oh bloody hell, I'm spending this much on my council tax, and yes, I can get a discount. So that's usually it's a tax that the tenant will pay, but there's other additional incentives that could and perhaps should be utilised. So I'm pleased that it's coming in. Some landlord organisations, and you may have seen the Dispatches programme fairly recently on the Duchess of Cornwall and the Duchess of Lancaster, and they were both saying, no, we can't afford to do up our houses because it's going to cost us way too much money. And this is the Duchy of Cornwall, and yeah, really disappointing. There's a real disconnect between the king, who's supposed to be, quite a environmentally minded individual, and then the estates, the royal estates, and that program perhaps didn't get quite as much of a attention in the press as I would have expected.
What is it called?
It's Dispatches, and it's it's about the Duchy of Lancaster and the Duchy of Cornwall. So if you get onto a ferry to cross the Mersey, then you have to pay some money to the Duchy of Lancaster because they own all of the waterways, and then the bridge that's taken you've crossed over to get onto your ferry, they charge for that. They charge the Navy for use of docks in Portsmouth. They're charging for the Royal Ambulance Service to store vehicles in London. I mean, they are a commercial outfit. They don't pay tax. So unlike other property organisations, they don't pay any tax. So for me, I thought it was properly scandalous, and it made me incredibly cross. But it's worth a watch but be wary that you might end up throwing something at the TV.
Yeah, it's a little bit unfair.
I mean the not paying tax bit, and we can't afford to retrofit our homes in Cornwall because it's going to cost us too much. I mean it's just worse than disgusting. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, you're from France, so we know what happened to your royal family.
No. But this is another topic.
Yeah, I've gone off topic, which I can do. Yeah. But yeah, I'm pleased to see that coming in. So yeah, go on. Are you going to ask another question around this?
About EPDs. I know you've got quite some good information. You've got a database of EPDs.
Yeah.
What I was going to ask you is, if, say, I'm a manufacturer of a product, and you need to tell me how important it is to have EPDs for my products.
Well, if you want to say anything about your product, make any green claims, there is now something called the Green Claims Code. And basically what that's saying is that you have to talk about your product and across the product's life cycle, so also its end of life. And if you've got an EPD, that means that you can back up anything that you're saying. So you can say, my product is low carbon, and here's the proof. And on the continent, you can't say anything about your product unless it's backed up by an EPD. So for the costs, maybe it may cost you between 7 and 10 grand or something for an EPD, which lasts 5 years. So maybe that's £1,000 and a bit a year or something. I mean, that's, you wouldn't even buy a stand at Future Build for £1,000. So I think, it makes sense. So quite a lot of our smaller manufacturers have invested, like Thermofleece and Clayworks have invested in environmental product declarations. They would sort of complain sometimes that They don't get asked enough for them, but that will only increase. I mean, what I would say is that because you've got an EPD doesn't necessarily mean you've got a sustainable product. It is, doesn't necessarily follow. So you've got to interrogate the EPD, and actually they're quite complicated documents to get your head around.
They are, yes.
And I was looking at one today, and I won't mention the company, but they were saying that they had carbon negative aggregate. And I was really puzzled by that. And so I was sort of quizzing the chap, and I think we quickly came to the end of his sort of technical knowledge. So I get very nervous when anyone says I've got a carbon negative product, because it's just not how you can describe your product. Your product will always take energy to make it, even if it's, a bit of timber. And okay, it is going to store timber, store carbon as well, but it doesn't necessarily, you can't conflate the two numbers. That's the thing. So the idea is that you're nice and clear about your embodied, energy and the impact at the end of life. And you're also nice and clear about the sequestered carbon and the benefits that bring. And so, so that's something slightly nerdy point to talk about. And then, I've been looking at biogenic carbon, and there are a couple of companies that are starting to monetize the carbon that's stored in long life timber products. And the EU is now regulating around this space. Because the voluntary carbon market has been shown to be, quite full of crooks, and people have been gaming it, and so the EU has stepped in, to sort of try and regulate it. So that process is underway. And I think that's quite interesting, because at the minute, all the carbon that's stored in our homes and all the timber in your roof, I mean, it's not rewarded in any way. And it's about time it was, I think.
Can you just explain what sort of information there is in an EPD broadly?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So that sort of, the first thing to think about is the system boundaries. So, is it like an A1 to A3, which is just from the factory gate to the construction site? And these days, it really shouldn't be. So it should be across the whole of its life. So the through the the amount of energy it takes to actually use that product on your construction site, and then its operational life and any renovation through its operational life, and then the end of its life and how it's disposed of. And then module D is into its next life. Is it recycled? Is it sent to energy from a waste plant, that type of thing. So they're quite complicated documents. They look at a whole range of environmental indicators, including things like eutrophication and methane, and a range of greenhouse gases. But at the end of the day, the sort of big number is the greenhouse warming potential, GWP, and that's the number. So it's the amount of carbon per whatever it is, and you have to be a little bit careful per whatever it is. So it's either a square meter or it's a per ton, and you've got to make sure you're comparing like with like if you're trying to make a comparison across products. We've got a fairly useful guide on our website that tells you how you can extract that type of information.
Yeah, I saw that. It's very useful.
Yeah, and I've just done an event on EPD with Rick, so Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. So that's me. I am Rick's qualified, and we only had a handful of Rick's people come along to it. Most of the people were our members or colleagues or on our mailing list, and that was quite interesting. And I'm going to meet the Ricks at 4:00 today, just after this podcast, and have a bit of a catch up with them. It's taken me years to actually agree to do something together, and they were really excited about it. and then I was very surprised at how disinterested surveyors seem to be. And I suppose at the end of the day, there's no legislation that looks like it's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
Maybe the next day or the next day after. And there's a lot of changes, like so at the minute, the Building Safety Act and changes to building regulations. It's almost, I don't know how people keep up, to be honest, because there's so much changing. So I struggle, I can imagine that everyone is struggling, to be honest. So, yeah, hopefully we'll be working in partnership with RACS and offering more training as well. So, so that's a free webinar on our website on EPD, as we did last month.
Great. We've got a few minutes left.
Okay.
But I've got one question that I thought I'd ask you. I saw last time on LinkedIn I won't give the name obviously, but suppliers of acoustic products. It seems to be expanded sort of plastic, that does absorb sound, and it's quite good. It needs to be fairly thick, and they were claiming that it's still a sustainable product, because of the energy required to produce it. You need to produce it, or you need lower temperature to produce it in opposite to mineral wool or other products that require really, really high temperatures. What's your comment on this?
Yeah, it just sounds like greenwash, I'm afraid, Mark. Ultimately, I mean, okay, maybe it is a little bit cheaper, but or it's a little bit lower carbon because temperatures are lower. But I mean, there's no energy required for sheep's wool insulation, or very little, for example. So,
how about mineral wool?
Mineral wool is. I mean, they're spun at quite high temperatures. So, yeah, I mean, they don't say, rock wool doesn't say so much about that aspect of things, and I suppose rock wool has the advantage in the fact that it can get wet. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just really, plastic's brilliant, unfortunately, and that's why it's everywhere. It's light and it's cheap, but it is an extension of the fossil fuel industry, and at the end of the day, we need to be moving away from such products. I mean, we all know that. There are some products where we probably won't, or the impact of doing so would be significant. So there's a place for plastic for sure. So I'm not being just bloody minded about things. I just think that if there's alternative products, then let's use those.
Okay. I think I don't want to say anything wrong, but I saw that there was the temperature or the energy required to produce mineral wool products was higher than the energy required to make wood fiber products, mainly for acoustics.
I think that's the case.
And it was quite interesting to discover this. Obviously, it doesn't mean we should be using mineral wool more than, or saying mineral wool is more sustainable than wood fiber, but I think that part was really interesting on the energy required.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Do you think it's true? Do you know? Can you confirm it's true, or you don't know?
I'm not entirely sure. I need to check. So that's something we should check.
Yeah, fact checking is important. We'll try to introduce a fact checking.
I try not and sort of greenwash myself because there's a lot out there. And if I don't know, then I'll just say I don't know.
Okay. So
I do know someone who will know.
Okay.
So I can get back to you on that.
Great. We'll put a comment probably.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Simon.
It's a pleasure, Mark. Yeah, really nice to see you.
Yeah, and it was really interesting. I hope people who listen to that podcast will have found it interesting.
Good.
How do we get in touch with you or the organisation?
We are ASBP.org.uk. So our website is there. We have a free monthly newsletter. You can sign up to that. We've got lots of events coming up. So one with a company called Buckland Timber, and they make glulam here in the UK. They're the largest manufacturer of glulam beams, and got some really lovely projects. And then we're doing an event around sort of, the impact of below ground, foundations and how we can reduce those. And then we've got our Healthy Buildings event in February, and then we're at Future Build the week after. So plenty of opportunity to get involved with what we do, and to catch up with us or see it and meet us in person.
Perfect. Well, yeah. Thank you again, Simon, and hopefully see you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I look forward to seeing you soon, Mark. Thank you so much.
Bye, Simon.
All right then. Cheers then. Thanks. Bye.